my great pleasure to read the citation for the award of doctorate degree in humane letters, honoris causa, to His Excellency Thabo Mbeki. On this sixth graduation ceremony of Thabo Mbeki University of Technology, the Senate of the University, under the powers conferred by Article 23J of Thabo Mbeki University of Technology Charter, and with the consent of the University Council, has determined that His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, the former President of the Republic of South Africa, be awarded the Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa of this university. It is a great honor to our university and the current and future graduates that His Excellency has accepted this award. The University Senate, in making this award, noted that His Excellency, throughout his life, has made many enormous contributions to humanity. The Senate specifically recognizes that Thabo Mbeki's early age political consciousness, which led him, while still a teenager, to become politically active and commit himself to pursuit of freedom and justice. And subsequently, his enormous contributions throughout his life in the liberation of the people of South Africa and the establishment of a democratic non-racial South Africa. And as the President of South Africa, his creative contribution to the African transformation and specifically his development and promotion of the African Renaissance and the establishment of new partnership for Africa's development, now known as NEPAD. Thabo Mbeki was born on 18 June 1942 in Transkei, South Africa, to Thabo Mbeki and by Mbeki, who are both teachers. His father was also a leading figure in African National Congress. His early formal education was acquired at Ewing Primary School in his home area of Beguleni, and later at a senior school in Queenstown. Thereafter, he joined Lovedale College for secondary education. He did his A-levels at Richfields College in Johannesburg, following which he enrolled at the London School of Economics for a degree in economics to be taken by correspondence. He completed his studies for the degree at the University of Sussex in 1965. He stayed on at the university for a Master of Arts degree in economics and development. He also received military training in Moscow in preparation for work and leadership in ANC. His political consciousness was fully awakened in 1852 during the campaigns organized to defy the introduction of apartheid policies and the racial segregation which were being introduced all over South Africa. He made a determination to fully participate in the campaign by joining the ANC. He was only 10 years old. ANC considered him too young to join. He had to wait until 1956 when he was 14 years old and already at Lovedale College to join the ANC youth league. He was thereafter very active in politics. Thabo Mbeki later joined the Lovedale School just 1 year after the enactment of the Bantu Education Act. The Act's main objective was the enforcement of a racially discriminatory curriculum designed to deny black people the kind of education opportunities provided to the poor. This turn of events in the context of increased repression all around South Africa led to a strike at Thabo College, in which Mbeki, now as the secretary of the ANC Youth League, Lovedale School Branch, and a student leader, played a leading role. The school was shut down and some 300 students sent home. Mbeki and many of these students were never to return, as they declined to sign the royalty letters that were application for their admission. He continued his education through correspondence. While studying for his A-levels, Thabo Mbeki linked up with Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and other top and older ANC leaders with whom he became immersed in political work. He was tasked to start a new political group, the African Students Organization, to take over the functions of the ANC Youth League, now that ANC had been banned. To this end, he traveled all over South Africa as the organizing secretary, promoting ANC's objectives and recruiting members. In 1962, Mr. Mbeki was ordered by ANC top leadership to leave the country and pursue further studies at University of Sussex. This was a part of ANC's strategy to continue its operation from abroad, following ongoing systematic crackdown on its activities within South Africa. In 1962 was a bad time for ANC, as the top leaders would be arrested, charged, and subsequently found guilty of treason in the famous Livonia trial. Mbeki, who was now a student leader at the University of Sussex, would use his platform to organize a march from Brighton to London, which culminated in a demonstration outside the South African embassy and the delivery of a petition signed by 664 students to the Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street. The global outcry arising from this and such other similar campaigns led the Livonia group being sentenced to life in prison instead of execution. For the next 3 decades, rallying support against the intransigent apartheid regime in different capitals of the world became a critical part of this work. Thabo Mbeki distinguished himself in his ability and willingness to reach out to different people regardless of race and gender. While working in London for the movement's young youth and student section, he persuaded the ANC's top leadership to allow non-African South African students who are committed to the ideals of ANC and willing to fight the apartheid regime for a democratic, racial South Africa to join the movement. This was a radical and bold move at the time, for most people in ANC were apprehensive of inclusion of non-Africans. This inclusion actualized one of the tenets of the ANC Freedom Charter, which I quote, "Peace and friendship among all our people shall be secured by upholding the equal rights, opportunities, and status of all." While working in Swaziland and Botswana, he created pathways in the ANC for many members of the Black Consciousness movement and led them in joining as members of the ANC instead of them operating as a different political entity. He demonstrated this same ability when posted from 1977 to Nigeria and assigned the task of establishing diplomatic relationship with President Olusegun Obasanjo's government. From the early 1980s, Mbeki, as head of the Department of Information and Publicity, ran an ANC campaign to involve more white South Africans in anti-apartheid activities. By the 1980s, significant groups of white South Africans had begun to imagine an racial and democratic South Africa and considered reaching out to the ANC to discuss what form this would take. During visits to its headquarters in Zambia, they found the ANC well prepared for this from the policies of inclusion which it had adopted and put into practice years earlier. Mbeki was one of the key members of the ANC teams which met in Zambia and elsewhere from time to time with various delegations of white South Africans. His attitude, obeying character, a deep and thoughtful engagement in matters are considered to have been invaluable in ensuring and shaping the perceptions about the ANC of many of these delegates. In 1989, he led the ANC delegation in the secret talks with the national government, which discussed and agreed on the unbanning of the ANC and release of political prisoners. He was appointed one of the deputy presidents of the Grand Coalition Government, established in 1894 after the constitutional election. Even as Thabo Mbeki applied his energies to the work of creating a new South Africa, he also applied his mind to envision the future of the rest of Africa, the Africa that had welcomed and hosted him and fellow compatriots, the Africa whose colonial government and societies faced new challenges over the development, division arising from the ethnicity and democratic government, and defilement of many dreams held by the independence. Furthermore, now that the fight against colonization was being concluded, leaders in Africa could steward the continent on a new agenda to build an even better and prosperous Africa. Later, in a speech in April 1987, Thabo Mbeki talked of an African Renaissance when he stated, I quote, "Those who have eyes to see, let them see. The African Renaissance is upon us. As we peer through the looking glass darkly, this may not be obvious, but it is upon us." He envisioned a Renaissance where African peoples are empowered to deliver themselves from the legacy of colonialism and neo-colonialism, and to situate themselves in the democracy as equal and respected contributors to, as well as beneficiaries of human civilization. In his now famous speech, I am an African, delivered in 1986, the theme of self-definition and self-determination runs through. It brings to the fore the historical foundations of African society, the contribution over the centuries to what we are today by black people of different nations, through their sufferings and heroic deeds. That of differences by peoples of other races coming to Africa under varying circumstances, some from Europe in search of fortune, adventure, or some other ideological or religious nations, others from Asia seeking a better life or God for their labor. It teaches us the strength of inclusivity and the richness of the diversity of the African cultures and the power of partnership. African Renaissance got expression through a number of contemporary initiatives in which Thabo Mbeki played invaluable roles. At the Norway Youth Summit held in September 1989 in Belgium, President Mbeki, Ambassador, and Dr. Africa were mandated to engage creditors for the total cancellation of Africa's external debt. This became the beginning of the development of a common African recovery program developed for Africa by Africans. This effort was subsequently merged with a parliament led by President Wode of Senegal, and eventually became the new partnership for Africa's development in October 2011. The new part is essentially applied by African leaders that goes to eradicate poverty and to place their countries, both individually and collectively, on a path of sustainable growth and development, and at the same time to participate actively in the world economy and body policy. Among the main outcomes of the part is the African peer review mechanism, from which many countries, including Kenya, have benefited. As a result of this African peer review mechanism, Kenya embarked on a second peer review in 2016 after the first one which was held in 2006. President Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the current chairman of the APRM Forum of Heads of State and Government, participated in the process, hailed the mechanism as a good tool for review of African countries as it is carried out by people having similar background intelligence. Thus, the unfolding of the African Renaissance continues. Mr. Chancellor, Thabo Mbeki's vision, ideas, lifetime engagement, actions and outcomes are attributes to general demand university of technology strongly identified with in pursuit of our vision to bring about the improvement of society. General demand university of technology was founded as a community initiative to create opportunities for young people, which follows heavily from Thabo Mbeki's dreams and aspirations. It was a creative education initiative which recognized that the appropriate weapon for the world to create a prosperous society will now be science and technology. The entire effort, which involved people from all walks of life, was reminiscent of the spirit which guided them through the war of independence against the British colonialism. Thus, the institution is aptly aimed at the freedom fighter Ferdinand Machel. It serves as a living commemorative monument in this phase of Kenyan history. The African National Congress, ANC's creation of Umkhonto Wesizwe, Sphere of the Nation, and hence taking up an arms in the struggle in 1961, embodied the spirit of Kenya's liberation war. This was a key and bold change in people's and leaders' mindset on approach to confronting seemingly insurmountable societal challenges. It was a Renaissance time lead. This very confirming of this degree to President Mbeki provides a unique and historic role across Africa that cements a shared past and a spirit of common foundation for a better and prosperous Africa. Mr. Chancellor, sir, it is my great pleasure and privilege to present to you and this organization His Excellency President Thabo Mbeki for the conferment of Doctor of Name letter of 90,000. Mr. Chancellor, sir. Mr. Chancellor, sir, as we continue to look Mr. President, I'd like to explain the details of the gown. Green is the color of Yale University and it signifies environment and nature, and that is what people fought for. On the lapel we have the logo of the university, and those are the hearts. Those hearts are the hearts of freedom, and it's an expression of the resistance by President Mbeki when he was arrested. Then we also have the map of Africa. In that map of Africa, we have the horn being grown from South Africa, with the South evaporating all across Africa as part of representing the African Renaissance. Thank you.
I admit you to the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, and by my authority, that of the entire university, give power to read and to do all that appertains to this degree.
Mr. Chancellor, and the other chancellors present, the Honorable Cabinet Secretary for Education and Cabinet Secretary for the ICT, the Vice Chancellor and the other Vice Chancellors, the Chairperson of Council and other members of Council, Senate and members of the academic staff, I'm very glad also that we have with us a very honorable person, the wife of our former leader, Dedan Kemati. Thank you very much, ma'am, for coming. And other esteemed workers at the university, the Defense Attaché at South African High Commission, fellow students, ladies, gentlemen, and fellow Africans. First of all, let me say thank you very much to the Chancellor for the very kind remarks he has just made, both about me and the rest of my family. Thank you very much indeed, Chancellor. But I'd like to convey my sincere thanks for the honor that the Dedan Kemati University of Technology has conferred on me by admitting me as an alumnus of this university as an honorary doctor of humane letters. I also apologize to the Chancellor that due to other pressing challenges, I could not attend the graduation ceremony in April last year, humbly to accept his doctorate in person. However, I plead that we as fellow Africans accept the traditional advice, better late than never. I feel particularly honored that I stand here today at a university which carries the name of a great African leader and hero, the eminent fighter for the liberation of Kenya and of Africa, Dedan Kimathi. I would like to believe that everybody present here today remembers this as a matter of course, that when Nelson Mandela visited Kenya in 1990, 4 months after his release from 27 years of imprisonment in South Africa, he sought to pay tribute to Dedan Kimathi and his fellow fighters for the land and freedom of the Land and Freedom Party, whose sacrifices had made an enormous contribution to the defeat of colonialism throughout our continent. And the important comment Nelson Mandela made in this regard during that visit to Kenya has been widely reported, but I think also bears repeating. And as you know, he said, in my 27 years of imprisonment, I always saw the images of fighters like Kimathi, China, and others as candles in my long and hard war against injustice. It is an honor for any freedom fighters to pay respect to such heroes, unquote. And indeed, I'm very, very honored that I have to pay tribute again to these great freedom fighters who were our leaders. I and others of my comrades were brought up and nurtured as fighters for liberation by Nelson Mandela and the other eminent South African revolutionary leaders of his generation. And as young activists involved in struggle for the defeat of apartheid and white minority rule, we too were inspired by the example which had been set by such heroes as Dedan Kimathi and General China of Kenya, and others elsewhere on our continent, such as Ahmed Ben Bello of Algeria and Patrice Lumumba of the Congo. We accepted this as our own inalienable obligation that we're to do everything possible to help ensure that as South Africans, we engage in struggle to realize the objectives which have been set by other African liberation fighters who accepted as our own leaders, such as Dedan Kimathi and General China. You will therefore understand that I, like others of my generation of South African freedom fighters, were schooled from our youth to understand that as activists for the defeat of white minority apartheid rule in our country, we are also Pan-Africanists, committed to engage in a common all-African struggle for the liberation of our continent and the African diaspora as a whole. Today, all of us as Africans throughout our continent face an historic challenge to answer the question honestly: are we acting in a manner which demonstrates loyalty to the objectives which such heroes as Dedan Kimathi, General China, Ahmed Ben Bello, Patrice Lumumba, the objectives which they set? And those objectives include ensuring that as Africans, we truly enjoy and exercise our right to independence and self-determination. That we use this right to determine our destiny, refusing to allow others to transform us into neo-colonial dependencies. That we use this right to enable the people as a whole, and not merely an African elite which takes the place of the former colonial power. That the people practically give expression to the demand immanent in all of the African anti-colonial liberation struggles, that the people owe power to the people. and that we use the fundamental right I have mentioned to ensure that our independent states focus on the central task to improve the lives of the citizens on a sustainable and sustained basis in the material, intellectual, cultural, and social spheres. That Africa achieves the objectives spelled out in the African Union Constitutive Act and the related treaties, charters, and other important documents. And that Africa takes a rightful place as an equal player with others in the world as a co-determinant of the global system of political, economic, security, and other relations, through the United Nations and other established multilateral organizations. I'm convinced, Mr. Chancellor, that the African intelligence, which is concentrated in the African universities, such as our Data and Primacy University of Technology, has an absolute obligation to contribute to the achievement of these objectives. And I would like to emphasize this challenge in a direct manner. The African intelligentsia at our universities has an obligation to understand that it has a solemn responsibility to address three major challenges. And these are to educate young Africans, to expand the frontiers of knowledge through original and relevant research, as the Chancellor has just emphasized, and to make the required intellectual inputs to help Africa correctly to respond to the challenges I have mentioned. It's a matter of common cause among us that Africa faces such major challenges as the eradication of poverty and underdevelopment, such as ending the violent conflicts which continue to afflict some of our countries, thus to achieve the objective set by the African Union to silence the guns by 2020. And thirdly, the entrenchment of democracy in a manner which enables the people both to play an active role in determining their destiny and to resolve any disputes that might arise among them through peaceful means. And the achievement of these objectives requires serious intellectual inputs, especially from our universities, which inputs would be informed by an intimate understanding of the conditions prevailing in each of our countries. And in his paper, Tertiary Education and Development in Sub-Saharan Africa at the dawn of the 21st century, a lost hope for present opportunity, Professor Raphael Ogom said, and I quote, in its current form, design and content, Sub-Saharan African higher education is of limited relevance in the context of rapid social and economic changes in the region and bears little connections to the local economy and society. He went on to say, modeled after European higher education, it has evolved from educating only a few highly qualified students into mass systems of lower quality. And said this expansion, unfortunately, has not been accompanied by a grounded redevelopment of curricula that reflects and is better suited to the realities of the sub-Saharan African environment and development needs. A rethink and redesign of the mission of higher education from the current curricula of theoretical sophistication, mismatch, and irrelevance to one that holistically aligns the educational system with local industry and overall development needs is long overdue. Without this, he said, it is likely, and regrettably so, that the socio-economic development promise of tertiary education in Africa might remain a lost hope at the dawn of the 21st century and beyond. Unquote. And in a related paper to 2004, Professor Thabo Jones of the University of Sierra Leone said our aim in teaching should be to produce men and women who are both critical and creative. Our students should be encouraged to be thinkers and doers, rather than accumulators of facts and received knowledge. He said this must be so if they are to be instruments of change, working towards the realization of a just and consequently a stable society, unquote. I would like to believe, Chancellor, that this eminent university, to its mission statement, which, as you know, commits the university to producing relevant technical and managerial human resource and leaders to contribute to the attainment of national development goals, does not fall within the category of institutions of higher learning, of which Professor Ockham said that their teaching and research meant that the socio-economic development promise of tertiary education in Africa might remain a lost hope at the dawn of the 21st century and beyond. I really want to say congratulations to this university for breaking ranks with this very bleak image that was presented by Professor Ockham. And rather, I would like to believe that the university is doing what Professor Thabo Jones suggested, of producing graduates who are instruments of change, working toward the realization of a just and consequently a stable society. On January 29 this year, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda presented a report to a retreat of the African Union as of state and government on proposed reforms of the African Union. And among other things, he said, looking around Africa, any one of us can give examples of situations that hurt deeply, because we know they would not exist if we had acted much earlier, as we agreed to do so many times over the years. Their lives lost in childbirth, villages filled with uneducated children, people locked in refugee camps for decades because of who they are, and countless families who lack the means to guarantee basic dignity. And he said, as noted in the report submitted to you, tens of thousands of young African bodies have been swallowed by the sea or abandoned in the desert in pursuit of a decent life for which they are prepared to risk everything, because they believe there is no hope at home. They testify to the urgent need to act. That was President Kagame. And that urgent need to act, Chancellor, emphasizes the imperative on us as this university, indeed to succeed the task to produce the well-prepared graduates who will be instruments of change, working towards the realization of a just and consequently stable society. With your permission, I'd like to take this opportunity to join in congratulating all of those who are graduating today. I'm certain that as they leave the university, they'll be fully conscious of the fact that this university, named after the outstanding Kenyan and African combatant for liberation, Dedan Kimathi, is an important fighter in the continuing struggle to develop Kenya as a country of hope for all their people. Its graduates must therefore be our new Dedan Kimathis, committed to use their knowledge and skills to help Kenya and Africa to achieve their renaissance. And I thank you very much.
We just allow a few moments for an official photograph with the Chancellor and the Cabinet Secretary.